My 6-year-old daughter said her deceased grandmother was speaking to her in dreams. At first I dismissed it as a child's fantasy until the visions became terrifyingly specific. She wasn't just warning my daughter to be careful. She was showing her a secret way to escape our house because my husband was planning to burn it down with us inside. The Miller house in Portland, Maine, stood like a timeless treasure. Its tall windows reflected the morning light. The brick walls held decades of memories, and the grand wooden staircase seemed to carry the weight of countless footsteps. At 38 years old, Caroline Miller paused at the kitchen counter, listening to the familiar creak of the hallway floorboards above her. To anyone else, these were mere signs of age, but to her, they were notes in a story she had come to cherish. "Mommy, look. The clouds are making animals," 6-year-old Sophie called from the living room window, her small hands pressed against the glass as if she could touch the sky itself. Caroline smiled. Sophie's imagination was a stream that never ceased flowing, each morning bringing a new adventure painted in her mind. Caroline poured orange juice into a glass and called her to the table. Breakfast looked ordinary, yet an invisible current of unease ran beneath the surface of their domestic tranquility. Daniel Miller, Caroline's husband, descended the stairs with his usual polished appearance. At 40, he was tall, handsome, and always meticulously careful about his image with colleagues and neighbors. His charm was magnetic. At home, however, his smile was a carefully constructed facade that rarely reached his eyes. "I have an important meeting this weekend," Daniel announced, ruffling Sophie's hair. "If it goes well, it could change everything for us. Daddy will bring you a special gift, I promise." Sophie's eyes lit up, but Caroline remained quiet. There was something in his tone she couldn't shake. He had been different these past few months, ever since Caroline's mother had passed away, leaving her a large inheritance. Her grief was still raw, but her husband's restlessness seemed sharper, more predatory than sorrow. Evelyn Miller, Caroline's mother-in-law, added another layer of tension. She often called unannounced, her elegant voice a thin veil for her disapproval. Evelyn saw Caroline as inadequate, never quite worthy of her son. With Sophie, her affection was conditional, expecting the child to behave more like a miniature adult than a carefree little girl. That morning carried all these unspoken threads. Caroline tried to focus on Sophie's laughter, but she felt the presence of shadows she could not yet name. From the outside, the Miller family was picture perfect, but within its walls, a quiet storm was gathering. The following days unfolded with a rhythm that felt both familiar and foreboding. Caroline immersed herself in preparations for an upcoming exhibition at the Portland Art Museum, a project she had dreamed of for years. It focused on forgotten female artists of the 20th century, and she poured her energy into it, hoping dedication to her work would ground her. Yet, the shadows in the house lingered. One afternoon, Sophie drifted into Caroline's study and held up an old photograph she had found. "Mommy, is this Grandma?" she asked. Caroline looked at the faded image of herself as a child beside her late mother, and her chest tightened. "Yes, sweetheart, that was Grandma." Sophie nodded, then whispered as if protecting a secret, "Grandma talks to me sometimes. She says I should be careful." Caroline managed a weak laugh, dismissing it as a child's vivid imagination blurring dreams with memory. But the words planted themselves in her mind, growing heavier with each passing day. The tension deepened when Sophie quietly confessed one evening, "Mommy, I saw Daddy on the phone with Grandma Evelyn. They were whispering. Daddy said you would not notice." Caroline paused. Daniel took countless work calls in hushed tones, but the seriousness in Sophie's eyes made her uneasy. Even as she reassured her daughter, a wave of doubt washed over her. Late one night, long after Daniel claimed to have gone to bed, Caroline walked past his study. The door, usually locked, was slightly ajar. Inside, one drawer of his filing cabinet remained open. Her eyes fell on a folder marked life insurance. Her hands trembled as she scanned the documents. Just 1 week after her mother's funeral, Daniel had taken out a high-value policy in her name. The sole beneficiary was Daniel himself. The air in the room grew heavy, her pulse quickening. She put the documents back, her mind racing. The timing was chilling. The next morning, Sophie lingered by the window. "Mommy, I dreamed about the basement," she whispered. Caroline froze. The old servant's basement, sealed off decades ago, had only been mentioned once in the property report. She had never spoken of it to Sophie. "What basement?" Caroline asked cautiously. "The one with a secret room," Sophie answered with complete seriousness. "It's for hiding when bad people come." Friday evening arrived with a heaviness that clung to the walls. Daniel kissed Sophie on the forehead before leaving with his suitcase, insisting his business trip was unavoidable. After he left, Caroline found herself wandering from room to room, a profound sense of unease spreading through her like cold water. Later, while Sophie colored in the living room, Caroline noticed a man in a dark coat walking slowly along the edge of the property. He paused near the garage, then circled toward the back. Her breath caught. She quickly closed the curtains and pulled Sophie close. When Sophie went to bed, she begged, "Mommy, can I sleep in your room?" The child clung to her stuffed rabbit, and Caroline tried to ignore the echo of her daughter's earlier words. "Daddy and Grandma are planning something bad." Sometime past midnight, a faint chemical smell seeped into the bedroom. Her throat prickled.
Gasoline.
Heart racing, she crept downstairs. When she reached for the back door handle, it refused to turn. Panic surged as she tried the side door, then the front. All were locked tight from the outside. A mechanical hum followed, and metal shutters descended over the windows, sealing them in. Smoke began to creep from beneath the kitchen door. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, trembling. "Mommy," she whispered, "we need to escape. Right now. Where can we go?" Caroline cried, her chest tightening. Sophie's voice shook but carried an eerie conviction. "Behind the pantry. Grandma told me in a dream." The smell of smoke thickened. Caroline grabbed her daughter's hand and ran to the pantry. Sophie pushed aside a lower shelf and pointed. "Here." Caroline knelt and found a wooden panel. It creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. Sophie crawled inside first, and Caroline followed, pulling the panel closed behind them. The tunnel smelled of dust and earth. Behind them, a loud thud shook the walls, followed by the roar of fire-consuming wood. "Where does this lead?" she whispered. "To the garden shed," Sophie replied calmly. "Grandma showed me." They crawled through the darkness, guided by a sliver of light far ahead. At last, they reached a rusted door. Caroline shoved it open, and they burst into the cool night air. Behind them, flames devoured their home, painting the neighborhood in a sinister red glow as sirens wailed in the distance. Sophie tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, let's go to Miss Barbara's house." Caroline held her close, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered. Sophie looked up, her gaze steady. Grandma was watching. She knew Daddy's plan. When their neighbor opened the door, Caroline gasped, "Please call the police. Daniel set the house on fire. He tried to kill us." By the time fire trucks arrived, the Miller home was beyond saving. Caroline repeated her story to the officers, her voice shaking. "This was not an accident. My husband planned this." The detective in charge, Lieutenant Harris, crouched down. "Ma'am, that is a very serious accusation. Do you have any proof?" With trembling hands, Caroline pulled out her phone and showed him the photographs she had taken of the life insurance policy. Harris's expression tightened. At that moment, Sophie spoke softly but firmly. "Daddy said if Mommy was gone, everything would be his. He said it on the phone to Grandma Evelyn, and he said it should look like an accident." Hours later, investigators confirmed it all. Gasoline residue, a security system tampered with to lock remotely. Daniel's supposed business trip unraveled. No meeting had been scheduled. Within a day, police found him at a gas station with a stash of cash and falsified identity papers. During interrogation, he immediately cracked. "I'm innocent. This was all my mother's idea." When Evelyn Miller was taken in, her polished facade shattered. Confronted with Daniel's betrayal, her composure broke. "That ungrateful boy," she spat. "I sacrificed everything for him. I only wanted what was best." The disturbing truth unfolded. Mother and son had orchestrated the entire plot. Daniel was drowning in debt from failed ventures and a mistress in another city. Evelyn, blinded by devotion, believed removing Caroline would set him free. 3 months later, the courthouse became the stage where every hidden truth was forced into the light. The prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece. Daniel's defense attorney first argued diminished mental state, then Daniel turned on his mother. "She manipulated me," he declared. Evelyn's reaction silenced the room. "Do not dare put this on me, Daniel," she shrieked. "I did everything for you. I carried out your wishes because I thought you deserved better than her." But the most unforgettable moment came when Sophie took the stand, clutching her stuffed rabbit. In a small but steady voice, she repeated her father's words. "If Caroline is gone, everything will be mine. We just need to make it look like an accident." She described how her grandmother, Mommy's mommy, had told her in a dream about the hidden passage. A quiet murmur spread through the court. It was not evidence in the traditional sense, but it was the kind of truth only a child could carry, clear, fearless, and impossible to ignore. The jury returned guilty verdicts for both. Daniel was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder and arson. Evelyn received 8 for conspiracy. 6 months later, autumn leaves drifted across the yard of a small cottage on the edge of Portland. For Caroline and Sophie, it was a sanctuary. Caroline had returned to her work, founding a new organization to support young female artists, the Second Light Foundation, funded by the very inheritance that had nearly cost them their lives. Sophie, with the help of a gentle child psychologist named Dr. Michael Hayes, was also healing. One evening, as snow threatened, Michael joined them for dinner. He had become more than a counselor. He was a steady, kind presence. After the meal, Sophie leaned against her mother. "Mommy, what is a real family?" Caroline thought for a moment. "It's not about blood alone. It's about people who protect each other and want each other to be free." Sophie smiled, glancing at Michael. "Then maybe he is family too." On Christmas Eve, they sat by the fire, the warmth wrapping around them. The old fears had not vanished, but they were now distant echoes in a house filled with peace. Caroline kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Your courage saved us, Sophie." Sophie looked up, her voice soft but certain. "We saved each other, Mommy. And Grandma helped too." Caroline smiled through glistening eyes. She had learned that true family is found not in blood, but in the people who stand with you in your most fragile moments. It is in a daughter's courage, a friend's steady hand, and the quiet promise of a safer tomorrow.